Yeah, that's my talk. Thank you very much. It was beautiful. We're the bright stars, aren't we? In case you don't know it, you're the bright star. Okay. Look at somebody next to you, just remind them you're the bright star. Well, it's good to be back. For those of you who don't know, we were just, Cynthia and I, Cynthia, would you stand for a minute? Please. I'm just back from a week-long honeymoon. We went to the Oregon coast where we encountered stormy weather and sunny weather, kind of like life, you know. Fortunately, it started off stormy and rocky and windy and blowy and settled off into beautiful sunny 55, 61 degree days and stuff like that. We had our own little internal experiences with colds that we were kind of, is Mike straight here? Nope, he's not, okay. He said it might be blissful because she couldn't speak. Not only could she not speak, but she couldn't hear out of one ear either. So, but we had a good time walking around and driving around and looking at things. She could taste, we were up in Oceanside near Tillamook, Oregon, so she could taste Tillamook ice cream. Loved it. She could taste Tillamook fudge. They have, this is not part of my talk. They have an entire case of various flavors of fudge in this Tillamook cheese factory. When I was there as a kid, all I got to do was watch them just stir cheese in a big vat, you know? That was it. Now you can have ice cream cones. You can buy tons of fudge. They got a cafe, the whole bit. And so our last stop out of town was a revisit to the Tillamook Cheese Factory fudge division. So we are stocked with fudge, and we are feeling better. So, but we had a wonderful time. The controversy today is, does this stay or does this go? Some people love it. Some people have, suggested that it would be better off. And so we'll stay tuned next week. You're gonna have to show up for Easter service to find out. Does it stay or does it go? I love a good soap opera. We're working this year on the theme of creating a world that works for all. And so today we're looking at the idea of group consciousness. The talk title officially is Don't Bring Me Down. I was going to, if we didn't have any musicians, get the Beatles song, Don't Bring Me Down. But yeah, thank you. We could have done that, couldn't you? And, but looking at group consciousness. And the group consciousness is the consciousness with which we surround ourselves. I think of it as the weather system in which we're walking. Okay? See, when I first got there, we didn't have the keys to the house. And so I got to get out of the car when we arrived at the coast at about, 9 o'clock at night? Something like that. Dark. Wind is blowing at about 40 miles an hour, torrential downpour, and go find the keys that were around the back side of the house, the ocean side, where they were hidden. On the way back out, I got to put those same keys back on a nice sunny morning, calm weather, and just, it's like I could walk around and go, oh, this is what this side of the house looks like. I'm so glad I didn't trip on that right there, and stuff like that. So we live in this weather system of our thought. We live in this weather system of our thought. We can do whatever we want to do. I could find the keys in the storm, but guess what? It was a whole lot easier in the sunshine, right? And so we take a look at our weather system with which we surround ourselves because it influences us. Ernest Holmes says that we believe in the control of conditions through the power of this mind. And the mind that he's talking about is not our own individual intellectual mind, but the capital M mind, the one mind. And our ability to tap into that allows us to control, to work with the conditions around us, to affect the conditions around us. It affects our health, it affects our wealth, it affects our relationships, it affects everything around us. If we're not directly tuned into that, then we let the weather system around us influence our thoughts, right? How many of you have let the weather system around you influence your thoughts and actions at some time in your life, right? Like me, right? Yeah, we all have, right? It influences us, and it creates the thought structures and the thought system in which we operate. There's a wonderful book out called Do You Quantum Think? And in it, the author talks about we all operate in a system of thought. And it's so running in the background, like an operating system on a computer, that we're not even aware of the system of thought that we're operating in. We can't think outside of it because we can, but we don't tend to think outside of it because it's just our norm. And so we think about this, Ernest Holmes in Science of Mind, we call it the race thought or race consciousness, but it's just simply that thought that is around us. If you want to know how your thought differs, hang out with somebody from a different culture. Hang out with somebody of a significantly different age than you. You know, if you're my age, you know, I just turned 65 last week. If you're my age, go hang out with people who are, say, 20 and find out your cultural differences. Okay? Another place we find out cultural differences, I love this, is because we're newly married. How many of you remember the first Christmas you spent with your new partner, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and you noticed that your family rules and the system of thought in which you grew up of how Christmas is celebrated might have varied a little bit from this person's? Anybody? You know? When do you put up the tree? When do you take down the tree? When do you open the presents? What do you serve for Christmas dinner? When do you serve Christmas dinner? You know? All that stuff. Which way was the right way? Mine, right, yeah. That's how we do our systems of thought. Because whenever we encounter somebody else's system of thought, we always assume which way is the right way. Ours. That tends to be our tendency to do that. Okay? And we have to be cautious, we have to be careful, we have to be conscious to be able to say, you know what, this is just their way of doing it, and this is just my way of doing it. And if we're going to create a world that works for all, we have to become more open to other systems of thought, other ways of doing things than just ours. Because creating a world that works for all is not creating the world that I think works for me. You notice the difference? Okay? So we have to shift that. So the people with whom we surround ourselves both support and reveal what our life is going to be like. They're going to support and reveal who we believe we are. They're going to support and reveal what we think about ourselves, and they're going to both support and reveal our expectations of how high or how low we will go in life or live in life. See, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer because they tend to surround themselves with people of like mind that have the same consciousness, expectations, processes going on in their lives, right? Okay? So who we surround ourselves with supports our expectations and our beliefs. They support our expectations and our beliefs. One of the quickest ways to start to change, if you want to improve, if you want to move forward, is to change who do I hang out with? Who do I hang out with? I told the story of the first service that in grade school, in the first 2 years of high school, I was one of those brainy kids, okay? You know, I was constantly on the honor roll and all that stuff. The only thing that suffered was penmanship. I couldn't do penmanship. Still, to this day, I can't do penmanship. But I was always on the honor roll and hanging out with all the smart kids and all like that. And at the end of my sophomore year, some experiences happened, and by the time I came back to my junior year, I was beginning my full-bore rebellion and anger period of life, okay? I was smoking, not always tobacco. This is in a nice little Catholic school in Portland, Oregon. Yes, I inhaled. I got kicked off the track team for smoking. Unfortunately, they didn't know what I was smoking when they kicked me off. And I had a whole different group of friends that I consciously chose. And my old friends were kind of looking at me going like, what happened to you? You know, one of the young lady from that period of time signed my yearbook, "I'll remember you back when you were nice." Okay? I talked to the first service that I don't have a whole lot of friends from more than 30 years ago because that's what most of my friends were like. I've changed since then, you may have noticed. Okay? I don't smoke anymore. I've changed, that was a joke. I've changed a lot more than just not smoking. Who we support ourselves with. So if we want to change who you hang out with. Get a mentor. Get somebody who you look at them and say, you know, I'd like to have what they're having. I'm going to ask them if I can study with them, if I can Hang around with them. When I was in Seattle, I taught the employment ministry, which was for people who were in work transition. And I always told them, go hang out at the Better Business Breakfast, which was a monthly breakfast for business people. Go hang out at that breakfast because those are people who are doing what you want to do. Get in that consciousness. I'd tell the single people who wanted to be married, go hang out with the couples group. Go hang out with people who are doing what you want to do. I was just at the National Convention. There was a minister there that I've admired for a number of years. And I had the opportunity, and we were having a conversation that it felt right. And I said, would you be willing to be my mentor? Because she's been in the ministry for a lot longer than I have and grown a really successful church. And she said yes. And so it's like, this is somebody that I can work with and that leads me forward into my next step of how to be a better minister. You know, I could just sit there and say, you know, hey, I'm good enough now. Some of you would agree. Some of you would say, David, can we talk? But we're always growing. We're always growing. You know, Ernest Holmes says evolution is always forward. So if we want to be moving forward, which is the only way that life moves, if we're not moving forward, we're not engaged with life. Okay? We want to have mentors. We want to have what I call training partners, which are people who will stretch us and grow us. When I used to be heavy into bicycling, I trained with people who were racers because they were faster than I was. And the way for me to get faster was to hang out with the faster people. And yes, for a while I was the last one up the hill, gasping for breath, bringing a lung up to look at, you know, and say, oh, that's my lung, before I put it back. Right as they were taking off and saying, okay, we waited for David, now he's here, let's go. And I'd have no chance to catch my breath, okay? But eventually I got faster by hanging out with these people. So if you want to get faster, if you want to get better at what you're doing, hang out with people who are moving in the direction you want to go. And at first it's uncomfortable. At first it's challenging. At first it's difficult because guess what? They're farther along the path than you, and you feel like you're running just to catch up with where they are. Okay? But if you want to be better, you get with better. I'm looking at a friend of mine here who I know has a mechanic, and I bet you somewhere in his life he hung out with better mechanics than himself to learn better mechanics. Yes. Okay? Whoever we want to be, we hang out with people who are better than us. I know Reverend Mary trained with Reverend James to learn how to be a minister because he was already there and she wanted to be there. I did the same thing. Not with James, but with training. So we want to hang out with the people who are doing what we want to do and surround ourselves with that. As we do our own spiritual growth, we will also tend to attract those of our new consciousness. So as we remember, you know, I love that reading, as we remember the truth of who we are. I was listening to that reading this time around and I was thinking how many of you remember the old Robin Williams movie Hook? Okay? There's a scene in there where he's just rescued his children. It's the, Robin Williams is the adult Peter Pan who's grown up and is, he's a lawyer basically and kind of forgotten who he really was. He's got a couple children. Captain Hook comes and kidnaps his children and he has to go back and rescue him. And he's just finished rescuing his two kids and he's carrying this little girl and she's looking back at Hook and she's going, you need a mommy very, very badly. And so as we were listening to that reading, I was thinking that there's many of us. You look at the political landscape right now, there's some people who need mommies very badly, to remember who they are and how loving they are and who they truthfully are, okay? We can look at our lives, we can look sometimes at ourselves and remember that we really need a mommy very, very badly to remind us and love us, and maybe it wasn't the mother we grew up with. Because some of us grew up with moms who didn't remember that for themselves. As we do our spiritual work, we'll attract new people. We'll also spin off people who don't support us, who don't move into that consciousness. And it's not that there's anything wrong with them. They're still God-informed. But if they don't choose to play in where we want to play, we probably don't have a whole lot to communicate with. I've met a lot of people, I had to go through this, and I've met a lot of people on the spiritual path who, after a year or two, are sitting there going, I've got these friends that I used to love to be with, and now it's just, they're so negative, and I can't, and it's like, yeah, they are. And either they can come around, they have that choice, or you might have to just simply say, I'm moving on. I had to do that with a couple of people. I had to have that conversation as I was growing up with some people that I really loved, but they weren't playing. I had this one guy from high school that always was a victim pity story, and it just like, after a while I was tired of listening to it. Thank you very much. And so it's like if you've ever done the 12-step program, you probably no longer hang out with the people you were hanging out with before the 12-step program, right? You don't hang around with the druggies and the drinkers anymore. Because you said, that's not where I want to be. I want to be with sober, healthy people. If you're doing the spiritual path, you're probably wanting to hang out with people who are doing some sort of spiritual work. Right? Okay? I mean, that's why we're here as a community. We like hanging out with each other because it feels good. So race consciousness, like I said, it's like the weather. It influences us. Who is around us influences us. And it's easier with favorable weather, isn't it? I mean, you can do what you want. There are, in sports, there are teams that love to go into the other team's home stadium or home whatever and beat the heck out of them, right? I'm a Seahawks fan. Many of you know that. I was up in my element because I was up in Oregon, and more Oregonians are Seahawks fans. I met one person at the Tillamook Cheese Factory who said, "Oh, thank God you're not a 49ers fan." I said, "You're my people." 49ers fans are God too, I know that. But the Seattle Stadium, the football stadium, is known as a hostile environment to come into. It's loud, it's noisy, it's really hard to play in, okay? And there are teams that love that when they come in because they want to go beat the Seahawks in their own home stadium. They train how to work with the noise. They train how to do that, and they become better for it. So we can work in hostile weather. We can. But have you noticed that most of the time we do better when we're working with the weather, when we're working with the wind, if you're using a sailing metaphor, if you're working in your own home stadium that supports and loves you, right? And so what you want to do is start to surround yourself with people and with a consciousness and with thoughts that love and support you. And in that regard, you can either be a thermometer or you can be a thermostat. Okay? Thermometer just tells you what the weather, the temperature is around you. It just reacts to whatever's around it, right? It goes up, it goes down, depending on what's around it, okay? A thermostat controls what's around it. See, this morning before the first service, Reverend Mary walked in, and she said, "It's cold. I'm just going to be cold all day. Poor me. I'm just a victim of the cold." No, she walked in and said, "There's a thermostat on that wall, and there's a thermostat on that wall, and I'm taking control of the temperature here because I want it to be the temperature I want it to be, 68 or 70 or whatever it was we set it to, and set the temperature." We can do that. We have the choice and the ability to choose the temperature that we want to create in our lives. We have the ability to choose how high do I want to go in my life? How free do I want to be? How loving do I want to be? How wealthy do I want to be? How healthy do I want to be? How fulfilled do I want to be? We get to choose that. And so we get to choose what is surrounding us by that choice. When we make that choice, we start, instead of matching energies with people, with other people. Have you ever done that? I've done that. Matching energies, somebody else in the room is angry, and so I'm going to get angry too. Somebody else on the highway is angry. I love it. A friend of mine recently posted on Facebook just a couple days ago. He said, that moment, the moment you pull over because you realize the guy in front of you deserves the guy in back of you. Isn't that great? Instead of fighting with the two, you just pull over and let them go on their own merry way, having each other. And you can pull back in, and you're walking around at peace. Okay? So we don't match energies. We start to determine what is the energy that I want to have. What is the weather that I want to live in? We start to hold that in consciousness. Now here's the thing, the truth about race consciousness, it's an illusion. There's only one mind. So where does race consciousness come from? Us. Within that one mind. There's only one mind thinking, and we all are using it. Then the race thought is within the one mind. So this infinite presence, the one mind has available an entire range. It says you can play with the entire range of life. Pure pain, suffering, and misery. pure joy, bliss, and harmony. Where do you want to play? It's all available to us. As conscious choice-making beings, guess what? We get to choose where on that spectrum we want to play. I think I talked when I very first came here about the fact that most people who come to a church like this, or many churches in general, come feeling somewhat sick or broken, and get to the point where they don't feel broken anymore, and that's enough. And yet clear over here, I'm out of camera range. Clear over here is bliss, outside the scope of what most of us can see. But we don't go there. We get to the point where we're comfortable because we're not in pain. Maybe we're a little past that because we're feeling better. But we don't sit there and say, wow, in an infinite universe of infinite joy, of infinite good, of infinite prosperity, of infinite love, of infinite whatever beauty, where else could I be playing? This is kind of fun being. Where else could I be playing? I could be a musician. They'll do better at it right now. But where else could I be playing? What else could I be doing? How else could I support the world in being more over there? Because we look at the world, and a lot of the world is kind of sitting over here, right? Yes? Have you noticed? You watch TV and read the newspapers a little bit, or at least hear enough to know that some of the world is sitting over here, okay? That's why we talk about a world that works for all. We get to be conscious beings, we get to be choice makers. Unlike the rocks, unlike the plants, and even unlike the animals, we get to consciously play and choose and interact with the infinite power and presence of the universe. That's the gift we have of being conscious beings. It's also the, if you will, curse or challenge we have of being conscious beings is, guess what? We get to look at wherever we're at in our life and say, on some level, I chose this. It's what I call the good news, bad news of religious science. Okay? We don't believe in heaven and hell. We don't believe in a devil or an angel to save us or a devil to blame things on. We got to kind of look in the mirror and say, I did that. I created that. The good news of that is if I created that, I can create something new. I remember Tony Robbins talks about working with a woman who was extremely, very overweight, and talks about, she was, depressed and trying to work with how to lose the weight. And he says, no, he says, look at the massive creativity you've done. Now we just got to get that creativity going in the direction you want to go with it, instead of in the direction you have been going with it. How can I turn that creativity around? If I've gotten myself in a mess, how can I turn that around? I've gotten myself somewhere. That's a whole lot better than a lot of people who just don't do anything, right? One of my teachers used to say, I'd much rather work with a person who's moving in the wrong direction than a person who's just sitting there doing nothing. Because he says the person working in the wrong direction is at least moving. And I can turn them around more easily because it takes practically a stick of dynamite or a small nuclear device under the butt of the person who's sitting there doing nothing but leaving, butt prints in the sand. Beach metaphor. To get them to move. So whatever you're doing, as long as you're creating, as long as you're being God, and you can choose to move it in whatever direction you want. What helps then is to create a consciousness around you that supports you in that process. So where do I want to hang out in that range of thought? So race thought is both chosen by me and created by me. I forget that I created it because it's part of the game. But I've created who I hang out with. I've created the thought systems around me. And it reflects my belief, and it holds me there. And in order to free it, I have to become more conscious and more aware of it and look at it and say, what is this that I'm really believing? And does it support me? Does it support me in moving where I want to be? Okay? It appears as cause, but it's not really cause. Finally, our cultural collective, our current collective consciousness in the world has created our current experience of the world. Our current collective consciousness. If you want to know why we have everything from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump, and I'm not, it's because there's a theme that goes with both those people especially. And the theme is we want something different than what has been before. We want something different than the same old political game we've been playing before. Okay? Now, we might not share one or the other's vision of what that is, that difference is, but they're both saying the same thing. And they're both gathering a lot of heart, energy, and interest in saying that. Because there's something within us that has looked at the world and said, you know, the world as it is really isn't working. Something has to change. And whether it's I think I have to go back to when America was great, whatever that was, or forward to something that hasn't been yet, or whatever view that I have, okay, we have to do something different. Different visions, same theme. So to create a world for all, that works for all, we have to change our individual and our collective thought. And the world that works for all isn't going to look the way that I think it's going to look, or the way that you think it's going to look. It's going to be different. It's going to be different than anything we've ever seen before. Because the only thing that we know right now is the world that we know right now, right? Okay? When the two religious science organizations, International and United, were coming together, the official people of the organizations took their time to figure out how we're going to handle money and education and bylaws and all that stuff. And the youth, the young people, said, oh, the heck with all that stuff. We're the same. We're one. Okay, we got these two funds, you know, for International Youth and United Youth. They put their bank accounts together, just bam, like that. Blew the minds of the old folks, okay? The official, okay? Because it was the youth that had the vision, and they didn't just have the vision, as I remember one person said, they didn't just have the vision, they moved into the vision. While the rest of us were all trying to figure out how to create bylaws, and how are we going to educate people, and how are we going to train practitioners and ministers and all that stuff, okay? And they were on. Okay? That's how a world that works for all is going to be created. We're going to have somebody, and we collectively have to say, you know what? We're moving on. I don't know where exactly we're going from there, and that's the thing about youthful energy, and it's not just an age thing, because we all have that within us if we tap into it. But youthful energy is that is willing to try something new, is willing to fail and make mistakes, is willing to get out there and say, you know, we'll get going and we'll figure it out as we go. Okay? And we get to a certain age where we're afraid to go try something new. We're afraid to look stupid. We want to know that everything is going to work out and have it all figured out before we take that first step. Okay? You know people like that. I know none of you are like this, but you know people like this, right? You've got aunts and uncles or cousins or friends or, you know, distant people that you've read about somewhere. Okay? We have to be willing to do something new. And it will be outside of our current race thought. It will be outside of our current experience of what we believe and outside of our current experience of what we collectively believe. Are we willing to do something fresh and new? Yeah. Thank you. So this week, 3 practices. Number 1, pay attention to the group thoughts or beliefs that are surrounding you. Just listen. Just notice. What are the beliefs that are surrounding me? What are the things that I just take for granted? You know, in race relations, in African American and Caucasian relations here in this country, African Americans often talk about what's called white privilege. That we are just blind. We don't even have a clue as white people what it's like to be an African American in the culture. We don't have to walk down the street or apply for a job wondering if my skin color is going to have any influence on it, because it's not. Especially in Reading, right? Okay? It's not. What are the blind things we have? What are the things that we just assume are this way? You know, for a long time, people assumed the world was flat and worked that way. Was it flat? No. But if I assume it, I'm going to act as if it is flat. What are the assumptions I'm making? So pay attention to your thinking. Pay attention to the system of thought that you're operating from, and what are your group assumptions. Secondly, ask yourself, what kind of group thought what I want to surround myself with to become the person that I really, truly want to be. If I could be full out me, the divine self that I came here to be. Now, when you do that, by the way, you'll start to hear your group thought going, who do you think you are? You're too old. You're too young. You're too fat. You're too skinny. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough time. I call it the yabbats, okay? We want to kick our yabbats out of here. What's the surrounding thought? What's the thought that I want to surround myself with in order to be who I truly want to be? And finally, the third practice is create the race thought that supports you. Create the race thought you choose. Surround yourself with the kind of people that you choose. Successful people have always done that. Artists have always created artist groups to work with. Industrialists back in the 1900s created groups, Firestone and Ford and Carnegie, and all those people knew each other. They hung out with each other. They worked together. Edison. Create the kind of people you want to work out with. Create your own mastermind team, your own group consciousness team, instead of just taking whoever you got. Most of us haven't ever chosen a team, have we? Okay? So remember, your choice is the creative agent in your life. Your choice is your creative agent. You can create the life you want. You choose it. And you allow that to start to move forward. You don't even have to know how. You sit there and go, well, I want somebody who's like this, but I don't know anybody like that. Fine. Hold that as a thought. Continue that thought. Put it into prayer. Those of you who were here a few weeks ago for Mae McCarthy's workshop, ask your chief spiritual officer to give you a lead on making contact with a person who knows how to do that. Okay? You have the power to create the surroundings and the thoughts and the people around you. So use that power. And then finally, notice that it might be uncomfortable. When you first start hanging out around those people, it might be uncomfortable. Work through the uncomfort. Work through the discomfort, because there's something on the other side of that that's so beautiful and so powerful, and you're going to look back afterwards and say, oh, that pain, struggle, and that discomfort, that was nothing. When you're on the other side of it. When you're on this side of it, it looks like a big chasm, okay? But if you will walk through it, you will walk through into a land of greater freedom than you've ever had. So that's your 3 spiritual practices this week. Pay attention to current thought. Ask yourself, what kind of thought would you like to be surrounded by? And number 3, begin to create that thought. Are you willing to take that on this week? Yes. Great. Me too. I'm going to close with a quote from Swami Muktananda. He says, the same mind, our mind, okay, the same mind that is the cause of suffering is also the means of attaining the highest happiness. The same mind that is the cause of suffering is also the means of attaining the highest happiness. One who has made the mind pure, and by pure simply means just open to our true nature, open to our God nature, open to spirit. When our mind is pure, there's nothing in the way. There's no clouds, there's no distractions in the way. We are open to spirit, purely open to spirit. One who has made the mind pure, strong, and still is able to accomplish anything. So I invite you this week to play with that, to make your mind pure, strong, and still, to surround yourself with thought and with people that support you in being the greatest person you can be, because you are a great person. Anybody? I better check this. Is there anybody who doubts that you're a great person? Okay. Right there's a practitioner. You can pray with her afterwards to remind you that you are a great person. Would you look at him and tell him he's a great person? You're a great person. I don't know if I didn't see anybody else's hands up. We all have our doubts. And we are all great people. Whether we've realized it, whether we've manifested it or not, the truth of the matter is we are God in form, and we can play with this. So let's move that into prayer. I know that there is only one presence. There is only one infinite presence, one mind. Pure love, pure joy, pure life energy, perfect light. The beauty, the intelligence of the universe, that one mind is all that there is. And we are one of it. Because it's all there is, there's nothing and no one that can be outside of that one infinite mind. And so you and I have to be one of that mind. And because we are one of that mind, we are one of the nature of that mind. We are one of that nature of life energy. We are one of that nature of love. We are one of that nature of wholeness. We are one of that nature of abundant good. We are one of the nature of power. So we allow ourselves to be aware of that. And from that, I speak my word that we start to create lives that are even greater expressions of this truth of who we are, that we step forward out of our smallness, we step forward out of the clouds, out of the unfavorable weather, into a new weather system, into a new place of joy, place of freedom, place of playfulness, place of beingness that is fresh and new for us. But as we open to creating a world that works for all, we make sure that we include ourselves in the all. There's nothing we have to lose or suffer, accepting stinking thinking, as we move into this world that works for all. We are both blessed and we are the blessing in this world. And so we open to this process, we say yes to this process. We don't have to know the how. We let Spirit take care of the how. We simply say the yes, we simply say the what, and we step forward into this fabulous, powerful new way of being, new way of living for ourselves. And so I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for each of us who says yes to this. I'm grateful for the good that comes out of all this in our lives. I'm grateful for the Spirit, the infinite love that runs through all of this life. I'm grateful for all of this. And so as we release these words into a law that moves them into form and experience, that law that knows how to grow them into form in our lives, we simply release, we simply let it go, we simply turn the process over to that infinite presence. We've declared the what we want, the life of freedom, the life of joy, and we allow that Spirit, that wisdom that surrounds us to create what it is that we want. We let it be done. And together we affirm that by saying, and so it is. Thank you.